Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kamla Delahaye. I'm a labeling specialist here at Polyfuse Graphics. I will be the moderator for today's webinar. We're going to wait just a couple of minutes to allow other participants to join before we get started. So hang tight and we'll be right back with you. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us to learn more about polymer fusion labeling, RFID, and the hardware required to use this technology. My name is Kamla Delahaye, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. All participants will be muted during the presentation, but I will be monitoring the comment section on LinkedIn Live. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them there, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar will be given by Jason Brownell. He is our Technical Success Director here at Polyfuse. He has over 30 years experience in the labeling industry, and Jason will be joined by Helen Barker. Helen is a regional sales manager for HID Global and is an expert in all things RFID, from the tags to the scanners, and we're excited to have her join us today. Please remember, I will be monitoring the chat window, and please make your comments there. And let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, Jason.
Well, thank you, Ms. Kimla. Appreciate the introduction. And today we are going to be talking specifically about the polyolefin family of plastics. So this is going to include all of your polyethylene, whether it's low density, high density, ultra high molecular weight. This is also going to include polypropylene, even filled polypropylene, glass filled or talc filled polypropylene. And it certainly has some challenges trying to label those materials. And so, but before we get started specifically on the RFID portion of this, I wanted to explain kind of the basics on why it is such a challenge. So when it comes to polyolefin materials, again, polyethylene, polypropylene, um, just by their very nature, they have some challenges trying to label them. And the first one is because it's a very low surface energy material. In fact, it's very similar to Teflon, which we use to coat our cookware so that things don't stick to it. And in order for an adhesive type technology to do well long term, you need to try to have higher surface energies. Again, and if we look at this chart really quick, polyethylene, polypropylene, right around 30 as far as dynes per centimeters are concerned. The other thing is polyethylene, polypropylene, when they're especially in outdoor environments where they're getting hot and cold, they're constantly expanding and contracting. And so I often use the analogy, it's kind of like putting an adhesive based bandage over your knuckle. It's fine as long as you leave everything flat, but as soon as you start flexing, it has a tendency to want to delaminate. So that's a challenge. Also, just by the very nature of polyolefins, you have surfactants, blooming agents, and this can all cause bubbling. And so if you've ever seen, a traditional like sticker with bubbles and blisters underneath it, could be caused by this outgassing. And so certainly people come to, Molden Graphics and Polyfuse Graphics for various reasons. Of course, brand recognition being one. And we have a lot of solutions that we can provide specific to olefin materials. But the big one that we're focused on for the month of February is talking about tracking and tracing. For example, here's somebody where they've incorporated some branding, some informative information, but then also a barcode as well. And again, so this would kind of be an example, and to kind of explain the technology rather than trying to adhere to polyolefin materials. Um, our material that we provide is actually a plastic label, and we're putting it in contact either with the plastic part and then using heat to fuse it into the surface, or in the case of rotational molding, we're actually putting it into the mold, and then the heat source to cause our plastic label to melt and the resin to melt, of course, is the temperature associated with the rotomolding of it. So again, a big takeaway hopefully from this webinar is that we are providing a plastic label, whether that's in the form of a logo or a barcode or a 2D barcode or even RFID. Again, it fuses together with the plastic itself, which is why we call it polymer fusion. This is an example of a polymer fusion RFID tag or RFusion ID. And again, we've seen especially like in the reusable packaging space, that there have been challenges trying to use different types of technologies. So we're excited to be bringing this to the industry, and anyway, it's just kind of exciting. So there's just some really quick contact information, and without further ado, I would like to bring Miss Helen Barker to the stage. I will shut this one down and introduce Helen. Hello, Helen.
Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, and she is with HID Global. So Um, can you tell us a little bit about the company?
Sure. HID Global is a global enterprise. We are a subsidiary company of ASSA ABLOY. ASSA ABLOY is headquartered in Sweden and is publicly traded. We also are a global company. We could look at I think the next slide is the map.
Yep.
All of the orange is the identification technologies business area. We truly are global. We have manufacturing in Malaysia, in China, the Czech Republic, and other areas as well. So we are a global manufacturer of RFID solutions.
Awesome. And let's see.
This is interesting because you can see that we are acquisition heavy. We were acquired by ASSA ABLOY back in the year 2000. The HID comes from Hughes Identification Devices, which is really interesting to me that it was the aircraft industry.
Gotcha. Did not know that.
Just recently, we've gone through quite a few acquisitions. We've got a full depth and breadth of RFID hardware to offer our customers.
Awesome. We talk quite a bit, and oftentimes in our conversations, you mention like ecosystem. Can
Yes.
you kind of explain what you mean when you refer to that? Kind of how does that
Yeah,
work?
absolutely. So, let me just say to this slide is we are one of 6 business areas at HID,
Okay.
identification technologies, and I think there's another slide that may. Anyway, let me just talk about the ecosystem. The ecosystem is our network of advantage partners and resellers, system integrators, ISVs, independent software vendors,
Okay.
because an RFID solution is really a complex solution every single time. It's not a cookie cutter. Every company is different.
Sure.
But there's essentially 4 parts to an RFID solution. There
Okay.
are the tags, and they can come in a variety of form factors. There are readers, again, a variety of form factors depending upon the use case. And then there's software, and it could be asset tracking, it could be inventory management, it could be track and traceability
Sure.
software. And then the last thing is system integration. And what I mean by that is many times you need to do a RFID site survey to uncover any gaps in your Wi-Fi and to make sure the coverage is adequate for the use case. Installation, training, services, things of that nature. So there's really 4 parts to an RFID solution. And the
Yeah.
ecosystem's important. If we didn't, almost always, I have to say, I'm engaging partners. And it's kind of like I use this, I'm sure you've heard me use this, a metaphor is I'm having a dinner party and I'm going to invite you, Jason, to bring the dessert. I'm going to invite Kamla to bring the salad. I'll grill the meat. And we all come together and we make a beautiful meal specific for an occasion or a customer.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great analogy. Um, and so you were talking about, uh, nothing is necessarily cookie cutter. You have brand new integrations that take place, but then you also have people certainly in the reusable packaging space where they have legacy items. They have a fleet, and they're trying to get RFID and track and traceability. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the difference you see in brand new stuff or people that are maybe switching over uh, to
Sure,
RFID?
sure. A lot, it really depends upon the size of the end user organization. Um, there are small, medium, and large companies. Um, Many companies, I think, when they're at the 50 million stage of annual revenue, they may be using something like barcoding, right? But they need to transition. But there could also be companies that don't have any infrastructure in place. And in that case, they're really going to need help pulling it all together. And that's where we come into play because we've got this fantastic network of partners and resellers and system integrators and ISVs who can come together to help them solve their business case. So
Absolutely.
it could be completely new, or it could be we need to modify the system that we have. A lot of times it involves process improvement as well. That's something else to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I was at the reusable packaging show in Las Vegas, and I was talking to a gentleman there, and he in the past really helped me out in just kind of my perspective, because he said to me, he goes, a lot of people want RFID, but they just don't know what to do, where to
Sure.
go. And I think that's very true in a lot of cases. They may want it, they may need it, but they
Mhm.
don't know how to pull all of those pieces together. So I think that's where it's really important to have those partners that we can kind of pull together and work together to have that dinner party analogy, if you will. So
Sure. And a lot of times we're going to be working with the end user's IT department. We might be working in distribution. We might be working with manufacturing
mhm,
departments. Could be supply chain. So a number of different roles within a company, and they may or may not have any experience with RFID, but that's where HID can help them in Polyfuse.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's awesome. I tell you what, so can you talk a little bit about, maybe the future of the HID Global and kind of maybe anything new that's in the works, or did you have anything there that you wanted to add from
Well, I can tell you
HIDs?
that HID is constantly acquiring companies, as you may have seen in that slide.
Sure.
Today, HID is primarily a manufacturer, but we do have vertical markets for textiles, for IoTS, which is active RFID. But the future for HID is going to continue to grow. HID is focused on solving RFID and other technologies. We have some new tags that have GPS, LoRaWAN. We have temperature sensing chips now. So, for example, let's say you and I are working on an application where it's a healthcare returnable asset, like that Sharps container, or it could be a container that contains organs for transplant, or it could be a container that contains laboratory samples, fluids, and tissues, and they may need to be temperature controlled, right? So we are now working with our chip suppliers, and we are chip agnostic. We choose the chip that's appropriate for the use case, and we're going to be able to offer a solution where the RTI has temperature sensing. It also has application in agriculture as well, right?
Sure. Can you explain to the listening audience kind of when it comes to scanners, the hardware portion of things, there's different options, right? Can you talk a little bit about the different options that are out there?
Sure. So we are primarily talking today about passive RFID, and we're specifically talking about UHF, ultra high frequency. And readers are specific also to the use case. So you see on the slide, there's a handheld reader. HID acquired has TSL, Janum, and Acura that we've acquired recently. So we have a broad reader offering, but we also partner with other companies. But there are other companies that manufacture readers that have portals, like at dock doors, or it could be fixed readers that go over a doorway or an opening. There could be tunnels that might surround a conveyor line. And there could be fixed mount readers as well on conveyor lines. But the great thing about readers is, let's say you have a lot of assets, pallets, containers, RPCs, and you want to find one in particular, right? You can use one of those handheld readers in the tag finder mode. TSL has a tag finder mode. It's basically like a Geiger counter. So when you are looking for, let's say I've got a room or aisles filled with these containers, they all look the same, and you want to quickly find something in that container, then all you need to do is put it in the tag finder mode, and with your software, you can identify what you're looking for, and it will literally beep. And then as you approach the object that you want, that you're finding, it will beep faster, just like a Geiger counter.
That's awesome. I've actually seen that in action, and it's pretty impressive. And I just think about the time savings, over the course of a year when you're trying to find a specific item, to just be able to walk right up to it. I mean, just the whole RFID technology, learning about it the last few years it truly is amazing. But and just to kind of reiterate, and Helen, help me out here, make sure I'm not missing anything. So all of these things kind of work together. You have the tag, then you have the reader, whether it's handheld, fixed, overhead, but then you also need the software portion of it in order to integrate those, right? Am I missing anything there?
Absolutely. And the software piece is really important too, simply because you're taking in a lot of data, right? Much faster than you would with a barcode scanner. and you're taking in a lot of data, and you're going to want to parse it. You're going to want to divide it up. You're going to want to organize it before you deliver that software to your uh, ERP system or WMS or MES software system. You're going to want to deliver it in the way that they can use it. So that's important too.
Interesting. Okay, great. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add? Otherwise, I kind of want to open the floor for some of the questions that have been coming in, and maybe we can address those.
Well, I just want to say one thing. I just want to say that the last 3 years we've been working together, this has been the most exciting opportunity and product that I've ever worked upon. And I'm excited about the future because these particular types of items, these polyolefin thermoplastic assets, need RFID. And it's going to create a clear ROI to use RFID. Why? Because you're saving time. Very simply, your ROI is going to be easily calculable with an R Fusion ID labeling solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has been exciting, so thank you for that. Okay, we're going to bring Miss Kamla back and see what kind of questions she's been monitoring. So, Kamla?
Hi, good morning. I did have a couple come through the comments there that you can see, but then I also had some private message to me. One regarding read ranges. Can you talk about read ranges for?
Sure.
Yeah, our current offering is with an Impinj. Monza 6P is the chip, and we've done extensive testing. The data that we've been provided, at least with our current tag and current offering, is about 12.5 meters, about 41 feet, kind of depending on which frequencies you're looking at, but it's been right about 12.5 meters. Did you have anything to add on that, Helen?
Sure. So the read range is a factor of what type of reader are you using, what chip is in the R Fusion ID inlay, and it can be adjusted. So for example, the antenna in the R Fusion ID is going to be optimized for use cases. So there might be a different chip or maybe even a different antenna design for a pallet than a crate, for example, or a medical device container. I mean, a medical waste container or healthcare container. So it's going to be optimized, and we look to get feedback. I know we're looking for proof of concept opportunities,
Sure.
and we can do testing and make sure that we're meeting your expectations for the read range.
Yeah, and it's important to understand too, and maybe you could touch a little bit on this. The contents, say in reusable packaging, if there's a lot of metal or there's a lot of liquids, that can impact read ranges, correct?
Absolutely. Ultra high frequency is affected by metal and fluids. So that is something that is part of the information that we gather. There, at the very beginning of any use case, we gather sufficient information and we provide samples so that we can test your specific use case to make sure it meets your expectations. So we can overcome metal and fluids,
Yeah.
but it's a conversation that we have and we work through it and we do testing to make sure we're meeting your expectations.
Awesome. Thank you. Kamala, any other questions?
Yes, there's another comment. This is specifically for HID. It says, is HID being approached or having conversations about traceability driven by concerns over EPR and circularity?
I'm not sure what EPR is, but these tags, like the polyolefin materials, are designed at the end of the asset life to be ground up, right, Jason?
Absolutely.
And can be recycled.
Correct.
So there's no issue. These materials become one with the asset and are recyclable.
Yeah, that's a big part of it because again, we're controlling the tag portion of that, and we're not. Um, it becomes part of the plastic, like you said. It becomes part of the asset because they're melting together. They're not adhered. They're melting together, and
Yeah.
absolutely can be recycled. So.
Oh, and that's the other benefit, of course. So let's just take an agricultural crate, for example.
Mhm.
And I've worked on this in the past for a different employer. We designed labels that were intended to be washed off during the sanitation process. So that meant that you created waste, additional waste with the washed off label,
Mhm.
and it was intended to get rid of the adhesive residue because it can attract bacteria and
Sure.
viral materials, and then you have to reapply it. So your cost, you may think, oh, a paper label is really cheap. Maybe it's 20 cents each or 15 cents each, something along those lines. And but you have to keep in mind on every cycle, you're going to have to replace it. Even
Absolutely.
hard tags, that's another issue. They're more expensive. They can be, let's just say, dollars or a couple of dollars, depending upon the size.
Mhm.
But those tags, while they're extremely durable, they need to be physically fastened. So
Sure.
there's a opportunity for, if somebody wanted to, they could knock it off with a hammer,
Sure.
a chisel,
And,
something of
and,
that nature.
and that kind of goes back to that whole, you know, covert versus overt,
That's right.
um, you know, um, for sure. So
Yeah.
great. Thank you for fielding that one.
Well,
Campbell?
that's when you said covert. That's the other thing. You don't have to put an RF symbol on the polymer fusion, the R fusion ID. You don't have to do that. You
Right.
can. It may help instruct people to aim their reader towards it. But if you wanted to keep it covert, you don't have to put the symbol there, and no one would know that it
Yeah,
has RFID on it.
yeah, because we can actually, match part color, things like that to just really make it blend in. So,
Yeah.
no, that's great.
All righty, I'm getting lots of questions, so get ready.
Excellent.
Okay.
Here we go.
The next one says, what about tag separation? Either physically removed by someone or maybe indirectly where it falls off in like a washing environment. How is it that the tag and the asset will remain together for the usefulness of the life of the part?
Absolutely.
Do you
You
want me
want
to
to go?
answer that, or do you
Yeah,
want
go
to?
for it. Go for it.
Okay.
You see failures in the field for sure. So,
Our Fusion ID cannot be separated from the asset unless someone literally takes like some heavy duty industrial shears and cuts it off. And then you've destroyed the asset, right? There is no tag separation with our Fusion ID because it is actually becomes one with the asset.
yeah, it's part of it. Absolutely.
That really sets us apart from everything else that you're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing of all is that no one else is doing this. Only Polyfuse with HID's help.
There you go.
That's awesome. All right, we've got a couple more here. This one is, what is the typical data capacity for the RFID tag used with Polymer Fusion? And then could you provide example of when you would typically encode specific data or would use a pre-encoded RFID tag as a pointer?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. So it's really up to the end user. Every RFID chip has a unique identifier, period. So every chip is unique. You can use the RFusion ID as a license plate, like on your car. It doesn't really carry any other information other than the UID. Or if you'd like, you can encode it. You can encode it with a reader. A reader can also write to the tag, and there's memory available on the tag for that encoding. Typically, there's a balance of how much do you want to encode, and then you're going to be feeding this information to through your software to your back-end software system. So you can decide, let's just say you have totes for agriculture, but you want to designate some totes for particular variety. And you could do that. It just simply adds complexity.
Sure.
So you can encode it up to the limits of the chip. If you want more encoding, we can change the chip, but it's going to be balanced with how much do you want to encode and have present on the asset versus in your software application.
For sure. And to get into specifics on the Impinj Monza 6P with our current RFusion ID, as far as the EPC side of things, the specifications are calling out 128-bit on the EPC side. So
Yeah.
to answer that question.
And it's flexible. We're just working with one chip at this time, but we are open to different chips based upon the end user's use case.
For sure. And speaking of end users and talking to a lot of people about this technology, I kind of see a split. Some people are wanting to have a fully encoded tag when they receive it. And then other people want the flexibility to do the encoding themselves. And so,
True.
you kind of touched on that, Helen, at the beginning there.
Yeah.
So,
and you can lock part of what you're encoding at the point of manufacture. So when we're doing the manufacturing and we're attaching the antennas and the chips, we can do the encoding at that time. If you wish, it could be done. It could be done before it's shipped to you, or you have the option of encoding with a reader writer on your end.
for sure.
I've got a couple more here. These kind of go hand in hand, so I'll read them together. In addition to the, sorry, I was kind of getting some feedback. In addition to the embedded RFID tag, does Polyfuse offer the choice to print a barcode and or a QR code into the product itself? And then along with that, can the barcode and QR code information match the data that's embedded on the RFID tag?
Absolutely yes to both of those questions. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about our current offering. We are a company of continuous improvement, so we are always striving to make improvements. But the current offering would be, in the case of the stampable or the Polyfuse side of the RFID, that is done in a two-step process. One, you're laying down the RFID, and then you're putting the barcode right over the top of it. And again, it's plastic and plastic, and they are fusing together that way. And to answer the question, yes, we can take the data from, say, a barcode and have that match up from an encoding standpoint on the RFID. Now, in the case of rotational molding, again, kind of a two-step process where you would take, you have to think about it in reverse, because now you're in the mold. And so you could lay down a barcode and then back that up with an RFID, pour in your resin, and then when the part comes out, what you're going to see, the most visible piece of it would be the barcoding information, or even a logo for that standpoint. You could put a logo down first, or a logo with a barcode, and then back that with RFID. Part comes out, and all you're going to see is the logo on barcode. So the answer is definitely yes. It just depends on the manufacturing process and the different use cases.
Alrighty, I've got another one regarding sanitation of adhesive RFIDs versus the RFID polymer fusion, especially for like food transportation applications. So maybe you explain the difference or the process that those types of containers would have to go through, adhesive versus us.
Sure, Helen, do you want to take that? I mean, you've certainly seen it.
So there are asset owners, or could be retailers that are the asset owners, but there are also other asset owners, pooling companies that are logistical pooling companies. In many cases, when you're dealing with food, actually in every case in which you're dealing with food, there's going to be a sanitation cycle for those assets. And because the polymer fusion is fused, there is no label, there's no opportunity, as there would be with a pressure sensitive label or even a hard tag, for harboring or trapping bacteria and viral matter. So the sanitation process is going to be a lot faster. There's not going to be any waste, and it's going to be a more, it'll be a better solution specifically for food and medical use cases.
Yep, for sure.
And it
Kimberly?
looks like, yep, I have two more. So
Okay.
thanks for coming. First, just a comment. Yes, paper labels, hard tags, etc., all need to be removed before mechanical recycling. It's very labor intensive and expensive. We are trying to lean towards BOPP and olefins like this. So thank you. Great comment. I appreciate
Awesome.
that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Could you go over just a little bit more active versus passive tags?
Sure.
I have a question regarding that. And then you can also include this last question, which is how long will the chip last?
Good question. Okay. So the active versus passive is very interesting. And a lot of people have ideas of how it works, but it really is quite simple. An active tag, either it can be battery free, but it also can have a battery. It can be battery, and it's based on Bluetooth low energy. In that case, it's the tag that is transmitting, not the reader. In passive RFID, the tag is passive. There's no emitting, but it's the reader that activates the tag.
So it really comes down to the power, right? So in an active situation, the tag is its power. It's powering itself. And
Yes.
then in passive, it's getting its power from the reader.
That's right. And in a passive solution, the readers are referred to as gateways, and they're simply sometimes just plugged into a wall or mounted overhead. And this is something that we can help people with is, are you thinking about active? How can you decide active or passive? I've got one customer I'm working with right now that's going to have both, right? And I believe the future will hold that some large installations will include both active and passive solutions. And
Sure.
there are battery-free active tags, and we're going to be planning to use those as well at some point in the future.
Awesome. And then from a longevity standpoint, as far as the tag material, it becomes part of the plastic.
Yeah.
So, that has its durability because it's part of the plastic as long as that plastic survives. But it really comes down to the chip. And from what I've seen, specific to the Impinj Monza 6P, the typical life cycle data that I have seen is 100,000 scans.
Right.
Does that sound about
That's
right?
right.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and it's hard to say. I mean, it's one of those things where the RFusion ID will last the lifespan of the RTI. That I'm 100% confident about. Some of these RTIs, they go through a lot of handling and transportation, forklifts, right? Ocean transportation on trucks. The crates might go from the field to the grocery retailer, but typically from the field, it's going to go to a processing center. There's a lot of abuse that takes place.
Sure.
With these polyolefin thermoplastic RTIs, returnable transport items. There's a lot of abuse. That's really one of the biggest reasons why RFusion ID is the best solution.
Sure. Thank you for that.
On that, I had a customer yesterday tell me they had 30% fallout with their adhesive RFID tags and all the chaos that caused by 30% of their assets no longer have the tag on them anymore and have to be replaced. So
Sure.
imagine how expensive and cumbersome that would be. And then that actually lines up with the last question I believe that I have here. And it says, any insight into the added cost of the embedded RFID tag versus a separate process, adding a non-integrated RFID tag as a separate step?
Yeah. Again, that's depending on a lot of different factors. It's, you know, certainly not in line with a paper type label. But again, as Helen kind of touched on early, we need to look at the business case as a whole. It's not just about the cost of an RFusion ID versus the cost of a paper label. It's what's the true cost. In that paper label scenario, Helen, you mentioned, every time that comes through, every time it gets cycled, things will have to be removed and then reapplied. And so, like you said, the ROI here is really about time and the longevity of that being there. The other thing that goes into it is, customization. How much customization needs to be done, or is this something that can take our off the shelf, if you will, our Fusion ID solution? Volume also plays an important role. So there's a lot of different factors, and I'm happy to, discuss a business case with somebody and see if it makes sense and if it aligns with your goals.
Yeah, and we can help you do an ROI.
Absolutely.
We're happy to do that. I'm very comfortable doing that, and if an end user is comfortable with sharing their current circumstance and the failure rate, the volumes. I've been in the label industry for more than 20 years and the RFID industry for quite a long time. And I can tell you that I've never been really comfortable talking about price just off the top of my head, because a quote takes into a lot of considerations. It's not like you're just saying, well, now I'm going to order the pencil, right, that I need for my desk. It's not like that. It's a custom solution, and the size makes an impact too, the number of colors, right?
For sure.
But the best thing to know is it's going to be between a pressure sensitive label and a hard tag. It's going to be affordable, and it's going to save you money.
For sure.
Thank you. One more popped up. How can people get a sample of an RF Fusion ID to test?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that, we are actively pursuing right now. We have several of them in the field. And so by all means, you can make contact with us directly and, reach out via our website or, our telephone number. If you want to jot this down, it's 928-634-8888. And by all means, give us a call, make contact with us. Anybody on the team here can help, and we can get samples, whether it's for rotational molding and going in the tool, or it's a thermoform, injection molding, blow molding type application. We can get the appropriate samples to you.
Yeah.
This is exciting because there's so many questions coming through, usually more than a regular webinar. So it just shows you how much of a need for this Fusion RFID is really out there.
Sure.
So I keep saying it's the last one, but I got another. So this one is on the topic of an adhesive RFID versus the Polyfuse version. Is there any mandatory preparation requirements for adhesive-based labeling, like cleaning or treatments of some kind, to create the bonding, and are there costs associated with that sort of thing?
Sure. I see this all the time, especially when it comes to, olefin materials. And I kind of touched on it in the beginning when I was talking about the low surface energy characteristics of polyethylene and polypropylene. So oftentimes I will see secondary processes like corona treating or plasma treating, trying to create a surface where an adhesive technology is going to perform better. And so, again, those are secondary processes. The only thing as far as our Fusion ID is concerned is we just want to make sure that there aren't any contaminants, because you're taking a plastic label, a plastic RFID, you're putting it in contact with a plastic part, and then you're melting those two materials together. And so if you have a contaminant, say mold release or an oil or something like that that is on the surface of the plastic, that can cause an issue. So you just want to make sure that you have a clean surface. But as far as doing any surface prep or trying to raise surface energy, that is not required at all.
I was going to add something. There are two opportunities for attachment. If it's injection molding, it's post molding with hot stamp equipment. If it's rotomolding, it goes into the mold. But if you've got assets, hundreds of thousands of assets, or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of assets, we have a solution for that too. Do you want to talk about that, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of depends on the different cases, but yeah, there are situations where you have legacy items that we are developing technology to make it portable. And say you mentioned like farming, agriculture, things like that. Maybe it's not like a manufacturing environment where you have this equipment readily available, but you need more of a portable solution. So yeah, that is absolutely something that we're working on.
Yeah, and probably the best opportunity in agriculture is at where the products are being processed at the processing centers.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, when they're going through their wash cycles and such, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then one more comment just popped in. It says, are there any opportunities to represent this process with Polyfuse?
Gotcha. Hadn't really given that any thought. If you could reach out after and give us a call, let us know. We can talk about
and I would just add to that HID is the global distributor for our Fusion ID, and we have an enormous number of resellers and
Gotcha.
partners out there, and everyone can sell this, and we will work with you. You can either work directly with Polyfuse, or you can work with HID if you're already an HID reseller. We can help you.
And will Polyfuse be exhibiting at the recycling conference in Texas at the end of March?
We do not have plans to attend that show, but that's certainly something we can look into.
And then I'd also like to mention that we will be at NPE this year in Florida in May, and we will be in the Sustainability Pavilion with our RFID information at NPE. So if we don't see you in Texas, we certainly can see you in Florida in May.
For sure.
And HID is exhibiting at RFID Journal Live, and we will have a specific area where we can talk about our Fusion ID.
Absolutely, and I will be there as well.
Yeah.
Great.
Rick, if you have any information about that show, if you could send it my way, it would be certainly something that I would like to look into.
For sure. Well, great. Does that wrap up the questions?
It looks like they've stopped coming through, yes, but certainly we'll still be monitoring the LinkedIn Live. So if anybody has further questions throughout the day, or if they watch this presentation later on, we will certainly reach out to you and address any questions that you have, or feel free to message or contact either Jason, Helen, or myself, and we'll certainly be happy to help you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Appreciate it. Thank you,
You're
Kamla.
very welcome.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you,
Take care.
Jason.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.